have a suspect in the area here.
They have explosives. Loud explosion, loud explosion. John fight, John fight.
After a vicious attack on their city, Bostonians responded with resolve and determination.
All right, there's definitely movement in the boat. Be aware of crossfire situations, all right? Sir, be advised, that subject is in custody. Again, he is in custody at this time.
We owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to all our outstanding law enforcement professionals.
They came to protect us.
It's a proud day to be a Boston police officer. Thank you all.
USA!
Tonight we think of all the wounded still struggling to recover. Certainly we think of Crystal Campbell, Ling Su Lu, little Martin Richard. We also send our prayers to the Collier family, who grieved the loss of Sean. We will determine what happened, and we'll continue to do whatever we have to do to keep our people safe.
We're so grateful to bring justice and a closure to this case.
Tonight, we can sleep a bit easier.
All in all, this has been a tough week, but we've seen the character of our country once more.
Good evening. I'm Jim Axelrod. It's now just over 24 hours since the capture of Jahar Tsarnaev, suspect number 2 in the Boston Marathon bombings. Tonight, makeshift memorials appeared near the race's finish line, where 2 homemade bombs killed 3 people and wounded 170 others. Tsarnaev, the surviving suspect, remains in serious condition with 2 gunshot wounds. He's under heavy guard at Boston's Beth Israel Hospital, the same hospital where 12 bombing victims are being treated. The focus now, unraveling the plot. John Miller is a former assistant director of the FBI. And John, Tsarnaev cannot speak to investigators yet. Why not?
He's got some serious injuries. One injury that affects that directly is there's a bullet hole in the back of his neck. Now, there's something intriguing about that. Of course, he was in a big shootout with police, and that wound could have come from there. But investigators who have talked to the doctors say it looks more likely that that is an exit wound from a bullet possibly fired into his mouth. That means while he was holed up on that boat, he may have tried to commit suicide.
The big question tonight, did the brothers have any help in plotting the attack?
And that is the big question, and they are driving backwards through the history of their life, saying communications. Who were they talking to? What are their emails? What was their phone? They'll do a full analysis on their phones. But key there is a trip that the older brother took to Russia. He was overseas for 6 months. That's a giant gap they're going to have to figure out. Who did he see? Did he receive training? Was there foreign support? They don't know.
6 months off the grid there.
That's a long time.
Okay, so once the bombing is carried out, the brothers, allegedly, stick around. Why don't they flee Boston?
They stick around, and apparently they make no effort that we know of to claim responsibility. So one of the other answer is they don't know, but one of the investigative theories is actually quite frightening. As they're driving around that night, they know their pictures are out there, they know that they are likely to about to be identified at any moment, yet they're in the car with a fully completed pressure cooker bomb, the same kind they use at the Boston Marathon, numerous homemade hand grenades to throw at people in attacks, and weapons and ammunition. One investigative theory is that as they knew the time clock was running out on their ability to remain free, that they were looking for a crowd, another target, to launch a final attack.
Now, prior to the older brother going off the grid, the FBI had actually interviewed him at the request of the Russian government. He was cleared as not having ties to extremists at that point. Is this going to be something that sort of comes back and bites the agency?
Well, it's certainly something that will bear more examination. But, the FBI has 2 sets of considerations there. One, they can investigate an American or a U.S. person who's here legally, but only up to a point. If they don't find any signs of either a crime being committed or connections to terrorism, there are actually rules that say they can't continue that investigation. That will be picked back through and examined, though, under a microscope.
John Miller, thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
There are mounting questions tonight about what events or circumstances might have caused the brothers to be radicalized and ultimately motivated to kill. Dean Reynolds spoke to one of the lead investigators in the case. Dean?
Jim, good evening. Well, as you pointed out, one of the lingering questions about the bombing was whether it was the work of a larger conspiracy. Well, Edward DeVoe, the chief of police of Watertown, where the concluding chapter in this drama was written right here on this street last night, just told us he doesn't think so. One of the major concerns throughout this whole thing has been whether there's a wider conspiracy involved here. As we sit here right now,
I think it's limited to the two brothers. Every information that I've been seeing, we've looked at, I think Watertown, Boston, the greater New England area is safe.
Chief DeVoe told us he's grateful there were no casualties among his men, 6 of whom confronted the 2 suspects early yesterday morning in a shooting that left 26-year-old Tamerlan Tesnayev dead.
He came out from undercover and started walking towards. He seemed to be engaged to one of our officers and got within 10 feet. They were having a gunfight 10 feet apart. And then for us, thank God, he ran out of ammunition. I just wonder why I'm not attending a funeral of one of my police officers after what they went through and how we looked at that and what they did. It's just an amazing bunch of 6 guys.
He said the Watertown police were able to trace and corner the suspects in their stolen vehicle because they left with the cell phone of the car's owner inside.
And eventually we were able to ping that phone and find out that it was in Watertown, and it was heading in a certain neighborhood of Watertown. So my first officer saw the car.
The surviving suspect, Dzhokhar Tesnayev, was apprehended last night after a heat-sensing camera in a state police helicopter detected the contours of a human shape in a boat parked in a Watertown backyard. Now, the Watertown police are understandably proud, as their chief told us, we don't have to worry about what might have happened if his men had not confronted the 2 suspects. They were heavily armed, said the chief, and they wanted to kill more people. Jim?
Dean, thank you. There are growing calls tonight from Washington to treat Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, an American citizen, as an enemy combatant, not a criminal defendant. That would mean denying him certain constitutional protections. But how could 2 young men who call this country home become terrorists?
Why did young men who grew up and studied here as part of our communities and our country resort to such violence?
The brothers Tsarnaev had been in the United States for nearly a decade. Ethnic Chechens, they came with their family to Cambridge, fleeing violence in their homeland for a better life in America. Immediately, 8-year-old Dzhokhar just seemed to fit in.
I know this kid to be compassionate. I know this kid to be forthcoming. Well, he's a great athlete. He's a sportsman. He's never been in trouble.
Larry Aronson, a history teacher at the prestigious Cambridge Ringen Latin High School, the school where Matt Damon and Ben Affleck attended, says Dzhokhar was a great kid.
He was just generous. He was compassionate. He was thoughtful.
And a stellar athlete, the captain of his high school wrestling team. He was popular.
Lots of friends on the teams. I mean, he was always with other kids. I mean, he was not a loner. He's not a loner. He was not anybody like that.
He was so impressive that in 2011, the year of his graduation, he won a $2,500 educational scholarship from the city of Cambridge. Dzhokhar enrolled in the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth and chose to study nursing, talking about wanting to help people.
I never saw him out of emotion, never enraged. He was just a real relaxed kid.
Sophomore Francis Berry liked hanging out with him.
It still hasn't really sunk in that that's, the kid on my couch is the kid planting bombs in Boston.
There's nothing about him that would suggest anything like this. Politics, religion, nothing.
In 2012, Dzhokhar took the oath to become an American citizen on, of all days, September 11th. On the surface, at least, the younger Tsarnaev brothers seemed to be thriving in America, but his older brother, Tamerlan, was clearly struggling. The 26-year-old once had dreams of boxing in the Olympics, representing the United States.
Yeah, he was decent. Absolutely, he could punch.
Julian Pollard was one of his sparring partners. Tamerlan was a top Golden Gloves boxer, but for all his talent, it seems he still didn't feel entirely welcome here, telling a photographer who took these pictures, published in 2010, "I don't have a single American friend because I don't understand them.
It's the first year I met him, he had on like leather pants and snakeskin boots.
And then Pollard noticed a big change in Tamerlan.
The second year when I saw him, he had on a t-shirt, hoodie, and jeans. The way he carried himself was much more humbled. He only spoke about his faith. He was big into religion.
Tamerlan attended this mosque in Cambridge with his brother. Today, a spokeswoman said they are cooperating with authorities and issued a statement.
In their visits, they never exhibited any violent behavior, sentiments. Otherwise, they would have been immediately reported to the FBI.
CBS News spoke by phone to a woman whose friend became Tamerlan's wife and the mother of his child.
No, he just seemed like a really normal, average guy when we met him, and then really started to change. He became very violent toward her and was brainwashing her into converting into Muslim.
In 2009, a domestic violence complaint reportedly was filed by another woman against Tamerlan. In Russia yesterday, Tamerlan's father told a reporter the complaint was the reason his eldest son never became an American citizen. His wife's family commented on the marathon bombings, saying they were, quote, sickened by the horror he has inflicted. At least 5 years before the bombing, Tamerlan's life started to take a dark turn. He dropped out of community college, and his close friend was murdered. A search of social media sites shows two very different sides to Tamerlan. Here he is on one, joking around about regional accents. He also posted videos on YouTube that feature Muslim extremism.
The jihad is already in force to liberate the Holy Land. No one can stop that jihad. No one can stop it.
But there's no evidence yet tying Tamerlan or his brother to any Islamic extremists. In Russia yesterday, their father defended them. My boys never even saw weapons, he said, except maybe on TV. But this was a Chechen family with roots in a region that had seen bloody civil war and serious incidents of terrorism. In 2002, Chechen militants took more than 800 theatergoers hostage in Moscow. 130 hostages died.
We were positioned 50 meters from the school.
And 2 years later in Beslan, militants took more than 1,000 people hostage and killed more than 300, most of them children. Just a few years before the Boston bombings, big changes happened in the brothers' lives. Their father left the United States, moving to Russia, leaving Tamerlan to take on a more paternal role in his younger brother's life. Jahar's friends noticed.
His older brother didn't approve of his partying lifestyle, and that the only answer I ever got for that was that his older brother was really religious and that he really didn't condone drinking or partying or smoking or any of that stuff.
The question now, did his older brother's influence go further than that? One family member who has something to say about the brothers' relationship is an uncle who offered some insight into his nephews turned bombing suspects in an interview with Chip Reed.
He put a shame on the our family, Tsarnaev's family. He put a shame on the entire Chechen ethnicity.
Yesterday, Ruslan Tsarny was burning with rage toward his nephews Tamerlan and Johar Tsarnaev. Today, the horrible reality seemed to set in, and he quietly remembered how different they once were, especially younger brother Johar.
He was an awesome kid.
Happy kid?
Happy kid with nice big ears, always smiling. He was special.
He says there was a time when older brother Tamerlan was special too.
I wanted Tamerlan to be a big brother to all our family, especially my children, my girls.
But that was before a deeply disturbing phone call with Tamerlan in 2009, the last time they spoke.
It was different, Tamerlan. Seeing no purpose in life, but pursue path of God. Okay, when I ask what is the path, he would say it's some kind of jihad.
Tamerlan, he says, had suddenly become radicalized.
It's a very, very sort of flow of words. Love in name of God, jihad.
Tsarny says it wasn't coming from a foreign influence, it was coming from his nephew's hometown.
The seed was planted right there. seed was planted in this little town of Cambridge area.
So it wasn't online, it wasn't from overseas, it was right there in Cambridge.
It was right there.
Sarney says he feels deep sadness for the victims and their families. He hopes that Johar will eventually seek their forgiveness, and he's horrified at what happened to his nephews, who he once thought he knew so well.
Why do you think his younger brother, Johar, was involved in the bombing?
The older brother involved him.
He involved him?
The older brother involved him. Even the worst gangster would not involve his family member, especially younger sibling, into something dirty and cruel like this. He's just another victim.
Before last night, it was a street you probably never heard of. Then it became a battleground. Today, some citizens who lived through the battle gave Peter Van Zandt a tour.
Were you worried for your own safety at any point?
Yeah.
Yesterday was horrible.
Franklin Street in Watertown, Massachusetts may be the most talked about street in the world today.
David Abel from the Boston Globe newspaper joins us now.
After spending hours hunkered down inside their homes while an army of police roam their street and search their property, residents like Diane Tiernan emerged today.
I have spoken with media from Japan, the UK.
With remarkable stories to tell.
I heard gunfire, I heard explosions, and we had the company of a Black Hawk helicopter over our street.
What was going through your head?
Really very frightening, but I must tell you what was comforting is having the contact of people texting.
Franklin Street resident Nick Gianetti came out to show us this video he shot of police closing in on Johar Tsarnaev.
And this is when they were walking up in complete silence. And then all of a sudden, it's just going to erupt, as you'll see.
What were you doing while all that gunfire was going on?
Holding my camera up and ducking.
This video, shot by Robert Glatz, shows the suspect being put into the ambulance. As the world's media converged on Franklin Street, Richie O'Connor sought us out.
A friend of mine owns a silk screen shop the next block over. He said, I'm waiting for a detective. I found blood splatter behind the building. It makes sense if the guy ditched a vehicle somewhere and had to run through some backyards.
Let's go check it out.
Sure.
Okay. Where are we heading?
We're going here. This is my friend's store. There's a policeman right there. So
Police car right up here.
So he must be looking into it.
What have you found here, Tyler?
Just basically I found a little bit of blood splatter out back of my shop. So it was very dark back there. I didn't have my security light on that night, so I assume it was probably just a place for him to, you know, maybe catch his breath and move on.
How far are we from the house where you hid out in that boat?
Probably maybe 150 yards away from here is where the boat was.
We head into an alley behind the shop.
Sir, stay away, please.
Got blood right here on this surface, and police are here. They're checking it out.
The blood is just to the left of the yellow brick where there's a little rise.
Yeah, I see
you
it
can
right in
see
here.
it, yes. There's about 4 or 5 thick drops. He ended up, I'm sure he cut through some yards that way.
We left the police and the suspected blood drops behind. Just 2 blocks away, Stacy Rolfe had her own story to tell.
It was this action movie I never wanted to be part of.
These are pictures Stacy took when police, SWAT team members, and a K-9 unit searched her property in the early hours of Friday morning.
They stormed and swept the entire upstairs.
The K-9 unit followed a scent to a crawl space in her backyard.
So this is the door that the SWAT team kicked in search and pursuit for the suspect.
When Johar Tsarnaev was finally brought into custody last night, the people of Franklin Street and all of Boston felt relief.
It's a great day for Boston. It's a great day for America.
Boston Mayor Tom Menino.
I just yelled out, "We got him! We got him!" And now
And you tweeted it.
Yeah, you tweeted it, right? Tweeted all over the place. One person's not going to ruin it. Those hard-working people who live on Franklin Street in Watertown.
At Boston's Fenway Park this afternoon, there was a celebration as the beloved Red Sox took to the field.
Won't you join us as we observe a moment of silence
those lost and wounded were remembered in an emotional ceremony. And all-star slugger David Ortiz spoke for Boston and perhaps the entire country when he reminded terrorists just who's in charge.
This is our city. And nobody gonna dictate our freedom. Stay strong. Thank you.
Ultimately, this investigation, the manhunt, and the capture in this case are all about the victims, some who lost the most. Next. One way to measure the impact of the harrowing events in Boston and surrounding towns is by the numbers. 4 innocent people killed, more than 170 wounded. Of those, 54 remain hospitalized. 6 of them are in critical condition. Terrell Brown now measures the personal toll.
A day after a city and a nation focused on a manhunt, concern and attention returned to the injured and mourning for the dead. Officer Richard Donahue Jr., a 33-year-old Massachusetts Bay Transit officer married with a 6-month-old son, remains in critical but stable condition after yesterday's surgery for a single gunshot wound. In an ironic twist of fate, Officer Donahue attended the police academy with his friend Sean Collier, the 26-year-old MIT campus police officer shot and killed by the suspected bombers. Officer Collier, an avid skier and hiker, was about to take a new position as a police officer in nearby Somerville. Deputy Police Chief Paul Upton.
Sean lived to be a good police officer. That was his goal in life. That's what he wanted to be. That's what he was.
They took my crystal away from me. I feel it in my heart. My heart is heavy.
Lillian Campbell, grandmother of 29-year-old Crystal, is trying to come to terms with the unthinkable.
A grandmother is not supposed to bury their young children. They should be gone first. And the kids should just go on with their lives, you know, and do the best they can.
When you think about her, what's the one thing that comes to mind?
She was a happy, happy girl.
Our prayers are with the Campbell family. Crystal was always smiling. Our prayers are with the Liu family of China, who sent their daughter Lingzi to BU so that she could experience all that this city has to offer. Our prayers are with the Richard family of Dorchester. Our hearts are broken for 8-year-old Martin, and we're left with 2 enduring images of this little boy, forever smiling for his beloved Bruins and forever expressing a wish he made on a blue poster board. No more hurting people. Peace.
And first responders like Massport Fire Lieutenant Michael Ward grapple with what they saw.
Somehow I ended up with little Martin, and I just remember his injuries. But he didn't seem that bad. He never complained, never cried. He just had a beautiful face, big, big doe eyes. And he was just looking up, kind of like, why? And I'm just trying to reassure him, and we're trying to help him, but that was it. I did what I could do.
Today in Boston, and around the nation, and the world, people were out to remember and pay tribute, and to try to recover.
The nightmare will never be over. This will never end for me, or the family. I'm just not thinking of my family, but how are those other families doing? You know, my heart is out to them because I know what they're going through.
From beginning to end this week, social media tools have been all over the Boston bombing case. Tracy Smith now with a look at how this investigation turned the internet into a worldwide dragnet.
The Boston bombing is certainly a tale of terror. But it's also a tale about the power and perils of social media.
At one point I wrote, I just wish I had a fact filter for Twitter.
Lance Ulanoff is the editor-in-chief of Mashable.com, a website designed for those who live their lives through the digital experience.
They're going to social media before traditional media?
Well, not only are they going to it, they're living on it. I mean, it's always with you. It's on your phone, and your phone is in your pocket. And if you look at people, most of the time they're looking at their phone.
And when the FBI released photos of the suspects,
if you see these men, contact law enforcement.
Hundreds of thousands of ordinary citizens rushed to the FBI's website. These amateur detectives made this footage go viral and beyond.
So there's tremendous value in everybody becoming foot soldiers in your quest to find the truth.
While the whole virtual world was watching Watertown, police used social media to announce the news everyone was waiting for. Captured. Even the mayor tweeted, "We got him."
I think it's a watershed event. This is the high water mark in reaching out to the public.
Eugene O'Donnell, a former New York City police officer and prosecutor, is a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice.
They really were validating the whole idea of social media. There were millions of sets of eyes looking for these two guys. There was nowhere they could turn.
Almost overnight, one suspect was dead and one was finally in custody.
This represents a whole new way of thinking.
It was a stunning example of what can happen when actual information is released to tweeters and Facebookers.
The folks who follow this say social media is undergoing an evolution of sorts. It started as a way to basically share information about ourselves. Then people used it to report the news. And now some people are using it to actually try to solve crimes.
They became investigators. Their stated goal was to find the bombers before the FBI. So they weren't necessarily saying, let's help find the bombers. They were like, we're going to beat them to it. We're really good at this. And I think their intentions are really good.
A lot of these online investigators began gathering on a site called Reddit.com.
Essentially, it's a message board for cool stuff you find on the web, with all of these sections, what they called subreddits. So one of the subreddits that was created was called Find the Bombers. And what they're able to do in real time very quickly is coalesce into a group, into a very focused group to do something, and then they start talking about it.
It's a phenomenon called crowdsourcing or crowd sleuthing.
They get all these photos and videos and then just start analyzing them?
Right.
Like
so what they do
would?
is they take the image and they put it up on a server where everyone can see it. They all work together and try and figure it out.
Reddit and Twitter were criticized for making mistakes.
Didn't they ID the wrong people at one point?
Yes. Reddit would on occasion have the wrong name and they'd find a face that was clear and they'd start to pass it around. And because of the virality of social media, that takes off like a shot.
But as Ulanoff points out, the crowd sleuths did have some success.
There's an interesting photo that they were looking at, and it's a photo that you've since seen in other places and on the news of the alleged bomber walking away, turning a corner. I mean, it's him. It's the white cap. It's him. I've seen this time and time again. The internet corrects itself. Social media figures it out.
And you can bet that when the next big event happens, these online citizen reporters and amateur detectives will be out there watching very closely.
In a city so famous for its history, this week is an unprecedented new chapter. 6 historic days when we come back. It was Patriots' Day, the Monday of the Boston Marathon, what was supposed to be a city's celebration. Instead, what unfolded was a series of unthinkable events that started when the cheering stopped. No different than any other faces in the crowd. 2 brothers watching the marathon on a beautiful spring day, about to become the 2 most wanted men in America. A huge explosion rips through the crowds near the finish line.
Something just blew up Run!
About 10 seconds later, a second blast, 2 blocks away.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Downtown Boston is a battlefield. First responders have never seen anything like this.
I grew up in this city, and to see that carnage that happened there, to these innocent human beings, I just asked everyone to pray for those poor people.
Unremarkable at the time, a camera captures the young man in the white cap walking away from the blasts. Over the next 3 days, authorities combed through clues at the scene, parts of a pressure cooker bomb, torn backpacks, and security camera images. Then, an unusual move by the FBI.
Today, we are enlisting the public's help to identify the 2 suspects.
They released surveillance video of the 2 brothers. Within hours, authorities know their names, 26-year-old Tamerlan and 19-year-old Jahar Tsarnaev. But that's not how they find them.
Push that ALS unit, opposite down.
Later that night, a police officer is shot at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Cambridge.
Okay, I want this area cordoned off. It's the crime scene.
Officer Sean Collier is dead at the scene. The brothers, the suspected killers. The 2 brothers allegedly carjack a man a few blocks away. They release him at a gas station, and a surveillance photo captures the younger brother. The car is spotted 90 minutes later in Watertown. Police give chase, and a gun battle erupts.
John fight!
The pursuit went into a residential neighborhood not far from here. During the course of that pursuit, several explosive devices were discharged from the car at the police officers.
They have explosives, some type of grenades. They're in between the houses down here.
I heard a tremendous explosion that just lit up the night sky.
Loud explosion, loud explosion, loud explosion.
The firefight ends in Watertown and leaves transit police officer Richard Donahue critically wounded, one of the bombing suspects, Tamerlan, dead, and his younger brother, Jahar, on the run.
He should be considered armed and dangerous and is a threat to anybody that might approach him. So please, use extreme caution and stay in your homes.
Mass transit is shut down. By early morning, much of the city is in lockdown.
We believe this to be a terrorist. We believe this to be a man who's come here to kill people.
Thousands of officers pour into 20 square blocks cordoned off, going house to house.
I say, Jahar, if you're alive, turn yourself in and ask for forgiveness.
SWAT teams swarm the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth, where Jahar Tsarnaev is registered as a student and was seen after the bombings.
It's just like crazy how you can just be so cool and calm-tempered like that.
It's been 12 hours. The lockdown is lifted and transit resumes.
We do not have an apprehension of our suspect this afternoon, but we will have one.
After a long and difficult day, an urgent call comes into the Watertown police.
A man had gone out of his house after being inside the house all day. He walked outside and he saw blood on a boat in the backyard. He then opened a tarp on the top of the boat and he looked in and saw a man covered with blood. He retreated and called us.
Heat-seeking cameras captured the man hiding in the boat.
Movement in the boat. All right, there's definitely movement in the boat.
We exchanged gunfire with the suspect who was inside the boat, and ultimately the hostage rescue team of the FBI made an entry into the boat and removed the suspect who was still alive in the boat.
Then, the words everyone had been waiting to hear.
Sir, be advised, that subject is in custody. Again, he is in custody at this time.
We're exhausted, folks, but we have a victory here tonight.
It's been nearly 12 years since the 9/11 attacks. America had started to hope that the nightmare of terrorism was behind us, but that all changed Monday at the Boston Marathon. Make no mistake, there have been terrorist attempts since 9/11. There was Richard Reed, better known as the Shoe Bomber, tackled by crew members and passengers before he could blow himself up. The would-be terrorist who tried to take down a flight with explosives hidden in his underwear. In New York City alone, there have been 16 attempts since 9/11. Most recently, the Times Square car bomb attempt. While all those efforts fizzled, the Boston Marathon bombings show we cannot put our guard down.
I think this event will be a further stimulus, a wake-up call, if you will, that we're in this for the long haul.
Bill Bratton has run 3 police departments: Los Angeles, New York, and yes, Boston. He says that protecting ourselves is a matter of dollars and cents.
Unfortunately, as we have gotten farther away from 9/11, other than some of the major departments, that there has been a diminution of resources committed to counterterrorism activities.
New York City is willing to pay the price, as my colleague Peter Van Zandt learned just yesterday.
And Commissioner, where are we now? What is this very impressive room?
This is our executive command center or conference room.
It's late afternoon, and New York City Police Commissioner Ray Kelly has an alert. Someone has left a package on a city street.
What is this right over here that we're looking at now?
And that is a portrayal of the alert. In this case, it's a report of a suspicious package, and it is on Broadway in Brooklyn.
Every hour, every day, New York authorities are on alert, keeping a video eye on hundreds of city streets.
We say we're always on a state of alert here because we're the #1 target in America. We average about 20 to 25 suspicious package calls a day, but in the day after the bombings in Boston, we had about 120 suspicious packages.
Let's talk about the use of technology in this case up in Boston.
The use of cameras have proven invaluable in this case, identifying the 2 individuals and doing it fairly quickly. You know, they had a lot of camera work to go through, and obviously they did it successfully.
It's surveillance images like these, the 2 suspects walking with their backpacks, that put faces on the terror attack and helped lead investigators to the 2 brothers.
Every step of the way, technology played a part in solving this and bringing these young men to justice, every step of the way.
In New York, as Commissioner Kelly showed us, video surveillance has reached a new level of sophistication.
Now, if someone walked up here and placed a large bag on the sidewalk, the system that you have today, would someone detect that?
We have the capability in many of our cameras to, yes, put in if you will, an alarm system that will alert us if a bag is put down and therefore a period of time, whatever determined it to be.
And remember that suspicious package in Brooklyn? The one that set off this alert? It turned out to be harmless. Kelly admits the system isn't foolproof.
Every city is vulnerable to a certain extent. There are no guarantees. There's no way that you can say with any certainty that you're going to prevent all terrorist attacks. What we try to do is to shift the odds in our favor.
So do these terrorists succeed?
They did, in the sense that they raised the level of fear for a period of time, but where they always lose is the unanticipated resilience that people show. We came together after 9/11. Boston, New England, the United States would come together around this event. Terrorists, by and large, in this country are always going to lose, and the sooner they get that message, the better.
For Boston and surrounding communities, Hell Week is coming to an end. Some thoughts now from Richard Schlesinger on these days of tragedy and triumph.
Something just blew up. Run! Go!
This was a week punctuated in blood.
A city steeped in history, a city where one leader this week said America was invented, made modern history in one of the worst ways possible.
It's devastating. Like, for someone to do this, I don't understand.
Monday's toll, 3 dead, scores injured. Before the week was out, 1 police officer was dead, another seriously injured, and an entire city was locked down.
Loud explosions! Loud explosions! Loud explosions!
Amidst all these images, all this fear,
Oh my God.
it's hard to put into words what happened, what it means, what Boston and America have been through. Secretary of State John Kerry, the former Massachusetts senator, tried.
I think it's fair to say that for this entire week, we've been in a pretty direct confrontation with evil.
Of course, Boston did not stand alone in that confrontation. Midweek, the President of the United States represented the entire nation at the prayer service in the city's cathedral. Your resolve is the greatest rebuke to whoever committed this heinous act. If they sought to intimidate us, to terrorize us, well, it should be pretty clear by now that they picked the wrong city to do it. Not here in Boston. Not here in Boston. With Boston first knocked down, then locked down, this might be the metaphor for the week. The struggle of Boston's mayor, Thomas Menino, to lift himself up from his wheelchair as Boston struggled to get on its feet. The mayor broke his leg last week.
Nothing can defeat the heart of the city. Nothing.
This is the sound of triumph that filled some streets around Boston when the second suspect was arrested. And they sang the national anthem a little louder at the game today. It was as if the entire city finally exhaled. After the singing ends, there will still be echoes of what happened Monday. The runners will come back next year, but they won't be thinking just about the marathon. Memories like these cannot be erased. They become part of a new normal, and life goes on.
And we'll have more on this still developing story tomorrow on CBS News Sunday Morning and Face the Nation. For now, I'm Jim Axelrod in New York. For all of us here at CBS News, good night.